You know that feeling when you are staring down a massive career pivot or you're getting ready to launch a new business?
Oh, yeah. Or even just trying to overhaul your daily habits. It's daunting.
Exactly. And there is this pervasive cultural expectation that we need to feel a certain way before we take the leap.
Right. We stand at the starting line, basically just waiting.
Yeah, waiting for this magical lightning bolt of readiness and confidence to strike us before we take a single step.
We absolutely treat confidence like it's a mandatory prerequisite for action.
We really do.
The assumption is that if you feel anxious or, entirely unqualified, it's this glaring red flag from the universe.
Like it's telling you to stop and go read another self-help book until you feel sufficiently brave.
Exactly.
But what if that entire sequence is completely backward? Welcome to today's deep dive. For you listening right now, our mission today is to completely tear down the traditional psychology of success.
It is going to be a fun one.
We are digging into an incredible, really insight-packed interview transcript from the Jay Shetty podcast, featuring entrepreneur and investor Leila Hormozi.
And what I love about this source material is that it flips conventional self-help advice entirely on its head.
It really does.
Yeah.
It doesn't just give you generic, feel-good motivation.
No, it replaces all that vague motivation with incredibly concrete psychological systems.
So we are going to explore why everything you've been taught about confidence is likely wrong.
And the hidden reason multi-million-dollar businesses just collapse overnight despite winning in the market.
Plus, how you can engineer a life of profound discipline without relying on a single ounce of willpower. Okay, let's unpack this, starting right at that feeling of not being ready.
Let's do it.
If we want to achieve anything, the traditional narrative tells us to, stand in front of a mirror and recite daily affirmations.
Ah, yes, the classic mirror pep talk.
Right. And Leila Hormozi actually tried that. She was 19 years old, spiraling, feeling wildly insecure, and she started writing things like, I am wealthy, I am beautiful, on her bathroom mirror.
And she would just stand there and repeat them.
Yeah, she stood there and repeated them.
Mm.
And you know what happened? Absolutely nothing.
Not surprising.
In fact, she felt worse. She felt like a fraud because her brain inherently knew it was not true. The source material argues a fundamental shift here. Confidence is an output, not an input.
What's fascinating here is the underlying cognitive psychology of how we actually build belief in ourselves.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, you cannot trick your brain into confidence with a dry erase marker.
Right.
Your brain requires empirical evidence, and to get that evidence, you must first build competence.
Competence before confidence.
Exactly. And here is the brutal catch that most people want to avoid to build competence. You have to be willing to be terribly, uncomfortably bad at something first.
Oh, nobody likes that part.
No, you have to embrace total humility and accept that your first several attempts will likely be failures.
The story in our sources that perfectly illustrates this is wild, and it requires zero mirror affirmations.
The Whole Foods story, right?
Yes. So Leila decides she needs to learn sales. So she drives all the way across the country to California.
Wow.
She knows nobody there. She has exactly $5,000 to her name, and she takes a job selling gym memberships.
But this wasn't behind a nice, safe desk.
No, not at all. The job required her to walk into a Whole Foods and literally solicit strangers while they were trying to buy their groceries.
That sounds terrifying.
It gets worse.
Right.
The very first person she approached just looked at her dead in the eye and said, "Off."
Oh, wow. Just a visceral, immediate rejection.
Yeah.
It is the exact scenario our brains are hardwired to perceive as a social threat.
She runs straight in the Whole Foods bathroom, sits on the toilet, and feels like she is having a full-blown panic attack. Her heart is racing.
Completely understandable.
But instead of quitting, or, going back to her apartment to chant affirmations, she makes a very deliberate choice.
She goes back out.
She goes back out to the grocery store floor with a completely new metric for success. She decides to get as many no's as possible.
I love that.
She actively sought out rejection to build the evidence that she could physically survive failure.
Oh, wait, so you are telling me the entire fake it till you make it self-help industry is actually counterproductive?
Completely counterproductive, because faking it creates massive internal dissonance.
Dissonance, like your brain knows you're lying.
Yes. When you step into unknown territory, your brain's survival mechanism immediately triggers. Your brain cannot predict what is going to happen next, so it creates fear and anxiety to force you back into what we can call the comfort cave.
The comfort cave.
Right? It wants you safe by the fire. If you try to suppress that natural evolutionary fear with fake positivity, you never actually learn how to navigate the unknown. You just mask the symptom.
That makes so much sense. Acceptance of those negative emotions, letting the panic wash over you in that Whole Foods bathroom, and realizing you didn't die is the true catalyst for competence. If you're feeling anxious about a new venture right now, it means you're doing it right.
Trying to be confident without competence is like trying to withdraw money from an empty bank account.
That is a great way to put it.
You can tap the ATM screen all you want,
Yeah.
but the funds just aren't there because you haven't made any deposits.
Exactly.
You have to deposit the reps, the awkward conversations, the failures, and the rejections. And this brings up a brilliant visual from the sources that totally changes the paradigm: anxiety in the passenger seat.
This visual is so powerful because the goal isn't to eradicate anxiety. That is a fool's errand.
Right, you can't just wish it away.
Exactly. Anxiety does not disappear even for elite CEOs running billion-dollar funds or world-class athletes stepping onto the field. You just change your relationship to it.
So you let anxiety ride in the car with you.
You let it ride. You acknowledge it. You can let it sit in the passenger seat or, buckle it into the back. But you absolutely do not let it touch the steering wheel.
It can come for the ride, but it doesn't get to dictate the destination.
That's spot on.
So we have got anxiety strapped in the passenger seat. We are out of the comfort cave, and we are putting in the reps to build competence.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you sustain that effort day after day?
That's the real challenge, isn't it?
Because eventually, doesn't the sheer friction of doing hard things just wear you down? The natural instinct is to just try harder, to grit your teeth and use raw willpower.
Right, just white-knuckling it.
But our source material reveals that discipline is actually not a personality trait at all. It is just environmental design.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Discipline is a system.
Yes. We tend to moralize discipline entirely too much. If you break a diet and eat the ice cream, or if you skip your workout, you immediately think you are a bad, weak, undisciplined person.
I think we all do that. But the reality is much more mechanical. You just have a bad system. You have ice cream in your freezer acting as a constant, frictionless trigger for the exact behavior you want to avoid.
You're setting yourself up to fail.
You are forcing your brain to make a disciplined choice 50 times a day every time you walk into the kitchen. And the source material points out a vital rule for building systems. Memory is a liability.
Wait, I push back on that a bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I really want something like saving my failing business or getting my health back, shouldn't my sheer desperation be enough to remember my goals?
You would think so?
Why do I need to treat myself like a toddler with phone alerts and sticky notes? If the goal is that important, shouldn't my memory hold on to it?
It sounds logical, but it ignores the reality of cognitive load. Your brain is a processor with finite daily bandwidth.
Okay.
Willpower and memory draw from the exact same battery. Throughout the day, as you make hundreds of micro decisions managing employees, navigating traffic, answering emails that battery drains.
Decision fatigue.
Exactly. By 7 p.m., your sheer desperation to save your business is competing with a neurologically depleted brain that just wants a dopamine hit.
Ah, the ice cream.
The ice cream. You cannot rely on your memory or your desire because life is inherently distracting and exhausting. You need external environmental triggers.
So if you want to build a habit, you must make it utterly frictionless.
And if you want to break a habit, you make it incredibly difficult to execute.
The source gives a perfect extreme example of this. Leila wanted to stop drinking, but she lived in a house with 6 roommates who drank constantly.
That's a lot of triggers.
The trigger was everywhere. It was in the fridge, on the counters, in the living room.
Yeah.
So she didn't just sit in her room trying to meditate her cravings away or rely on her willpower.
What did she do?
She moved out. She eliminated the environmental trigger entirely. Half of the desire to drink vanished instantly because the proximity was gone.
That is environmental design at its best. And we see the exact same psychological mechanism applied to her physical health.
Oh, the app deleting.
Yes. When she wanted to lose weight, she didn't just promise herself to eat better. She went into her phone and deleted every single food delivery app.
Brutal, but effective.
And then she created what the sources call the miserable snack drawer, a drawer in her house filled only with healthy, somewhat bland things. She removed the decision-making process entirely.
I love the miserable snack drawer. It's brilliant. It's like bowling with the bumpers up instead of trying to throw a perfect strike every single time you step up to the lane.
That's a perfect analogy.
You are just altering the physical environment so that failure is actually harder to achieve than success.
And that is the analytical takeaway for the listener to internalize. We all already have systems in place right now, but for many of us, our current systems are perfectly engineered for our own failure.
Because we leave the ice cream in the fridge.
Right. If you have to fight your physical environment all day, your willpower will inevitably deplete and you will lose. So take a moment and look at your own life. What is one point of physical friction you can add today to a habit you want to break?
Like, can you unplug your television?
Can you leave your credit cards in a lockbox? Or, conversely, what is one trigger you can set, like an automatic phone alert to log your food? Or putting your running shoes literally on top of your alarm clock to make a good habit automatic?
So we have mastered personal discipline at a micro level. We are surviving the Whole Foods bathroom panic attacks. Yeah. We are engineering our environment, and we start seeing real momentum.
The business is growing.
The career's taking off. But it is fascinating when you look at the source material. The tools that help you build a $5,000 habit actually break when you try to scale them to a $90 million company.
They absolutely do.
Suddenly, environmental friction isn't enough. What happens when the stakes get massive? Yeah. Surprisingly, what destroys scaling businesses isn't the market or the competition.
It is the mind.
The mind.
This is a crucial pivot in our deep dive, moving from personal discipline to organizational leadership. There is a sobering story in the transcript about a company that grew astronomically.
Right, from $2 million to $90 million.
Yes. They scaled from $2 million to $90 million a year. They were absolutely dominating their sector. Then, a major competitor threatened them and eventually served them with a massive existential lawsuit.
And here's the kicker. They fought the lawsuit, and they won. They were totally victorious.
But the company still went to zero shortly after.
Wait, how does that happen?
The company went to zero not because of the legal battle, not because they ran out of capital, and not because of market conditions. It collapsed because the founder's emotional tolerance simply broke.
Oh, wow.
The prolonged stress, the sleepless nights, the ambiguity of the lawsuit, she just couldn't handle the psychological weight of the uncertainty anymore.
She just burnt out.
Exactly. Even after winning, she was so burnt out that she shut the business down. Markets do not put businesses out of business. Founders put themselves out of business when they lack emotional management and frustration tolerance.
So what does this all mean? Are we saying emotional regulation actually has a higher ROI than having a brilliant marketing strategy?
In the long run, undeniably yes. Marketing can bring in revenue, but a lack of emotional regulation will burn the entire infrastructure to the ground.
That's intense.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a leader's real primary job is managing their own internal state so they have the capacity to carry the uncertainty for their entire team.
Which is heavy.
The source material introduces a concept called the foundation. Think of a massive skyscraper. When you walk into a towering, beautiful glass building, you don't look down and marvel at the concrete foundation.
No, you just look at the view.
Right. But the higher the building you want to construct, the deeper and wider that unseen foundation must go into the dirt.
And for a leader, that unseen foundation is their daily practices. It's waking up at 4:30 a.m., it's going to therapy, it's journaling, it's taking a quiet walk without a podcast playing.
It's not soft self-care.
No, it is the exact neurological mechanism that prevents you from breaking when you have 4 lawsuits, a supply chain collapse, and personnel issues all hitting your desk on a random Tuesday.
The CEO needs to manage their own cup first, because when they sit in that chair, they have 3 massive macro focuses they have to execute on.
People, vision, and cash.
And we should briefly define those to understand the weight of the role. Cash isn't just about making money. It is about ensuring the business has the runway to survive shocks.
Which provides psychological safety for the employees.
Exactly. People is about sourcing and placing the exact right executives who can operate autonomously. But the most nuanced of the 3 is vision.
The DSS.
Yes, the source material replaces the rigid, traditional 50-page business plan with a much more dynamic framework called a DSS, a desired superior state.
A desired superior state. It sounds a bit academic, but it is actually incredibly practical. How is a DSS different from just having a really good business plan?
A traditional business plan dictates exactly how you will do something. A DSS dictates what the ultimate reality needs to look like in 3 to 5 years, both quantitatively and qualitatively.
But it leads to how flexible.
Exactly. It is an ethos. If your rigid business plan is, we are going to build the world's best search engine algorithm, a sudden shift in artificial intelligence might make your entire plan obsolete overnight.
And your team panics.
But if your DSS is, we are going to seamlessly organize the world's information, your team can dynamically adapt to any technological shift because the ultimate vision hasn't changed.
Only the tool has. It makes me think of setting a GPS.
Oh, that's good.
A traditional business plan is like printing out turn-by-turn MapQuest directions. If a road is closed, you are completely lost and you have to pull over.
Right.
A DSS is like putting a pin on the map. The software might reroute you through side streets or highways depending on traffic, but the destination remains exactly the same.
That is the perfect way to look at it.
But translating that DSS down to the team level brings up a whole new challenge.
Yeah.
If the leader's emotional capacity dictates the ceiling of the entire organization, how does that leader practically guide their team day to day?
How do they hire? How do they critique?
Exactly. This brings us to redefining the meaning of the work itself. And the sources point to an incredible, profound study from Yale University on hospital cleaners.
Yes, Amy Rusnevsky's team at Yale. They researched what most would consider one of the most grueling, unglamorous jobs in America, cleaning hospital rooms.
Cleaning toilets, changing soiled bed sheets, dealing with sickness and grief all day.
They studied two distinct groups of workers within the same hospital, doing the exact same physical tasks for the exact same hourly pay.
Okay.
One group described themselves purely as low-skill labor. They saw the job as just cleaning up messes, and they were generally exhausted, unhappy, and disconnected.
And the other group?
The other group organically began referring to themselves as healers and carers.
Healers. They didn't see themselves as janitors.
No, they recognized that a perfectly sterilized hospital room prevented secondary infections.
They saw that a welcoming, clean environment gave a sick patient dignity and allowed families to stay longer without feeling rushed out of a depressing space.
They were literally doing the exact same low-skill labor, but they found profound meaning in it. It's a psychological concept called job crafting.
Job crafting. And the sociological impact of this cognitive reframing was staggering.
It was. The healers literally experienced less physical fatigue. They anticipated patients' needs, which gave them a sense of autonomy and control over their environment.
It completely altered their neurological response to the stress of the job.
This raises an important question for all of us, no matter our profession. Burnout is rarely just about the sheer volume of tasks we are doing.
It's almost always about the story we're telling ourselves about those tasks.
A great leader's job is to help their team craft that meaning, connecting their daily grind to the DSS. And that signaling starts from the very first interaction, the hiring process, and the resume.
Oh man, the source material is brutally clear about what works in today's hiring landscape.
Because of ChatGPT, AI-generated corporate jargon is entirely dead.
Dead. Saying you are a synergistic, disciplined executive with architectural clarity means absolutely nothing to a hiring manager who has read 500 identical cover letters.
It's just noise. You need a hook. You need proof, which means showing, not just telling, and you need a CTA.
A call to action offering upfront value. There is a brilliant story in the transcript about a videographer trying to land a contract.
He didn't just send a generic PDF portfolio link, right?
You know, he went and bought the company's product, a specific brand of tea. He happened to be taking a trip to Hawaii, so he took the tea with him and shot a beautiful, high-quality, short promotional video of the tea underwater and on the beach.
He actually shot a commercial for them.
Yeah. He sent that video directly to the founders as a free sample of his work. Including a CTA with free upfront work on your resume is like giving a studio executive a thrilling, fully produced movie trailer instead of just handing them a dry 120-page script.
And hoping they have the patience to read it. It's undeniable. And we have to look at why this works so effectively on human psychology.
Why does it work?
A traditional resume asks the employer to take a massive risk on an unknown variable. Will this person actually perform?
It's a gamble.
By providing a high-quality CTA up front, you trigger the law of reciprocity. They feel neurologically compelled to respond to your effort, and you instantly remove the hiring manager's risk.
You prove competence before you even ask for the job.
But inevitably, once you hire these highly competent people, they will make mistakes.
Right, everyone does.
How do you course correct them without breaking their morale? The source material offers a masterful feedback framework. The absolute golden rule of leadership communication is never insult, only critique.
The distinction between those two words is massive. An insult associates the person with something negative. It attacks their core identity.
Yes. A critique is purely about the mechanical gap between where they are right now and the goal they want to reach.
This is where the selling sunset analogy comes in from the transcript, which is such a funny but painfully accurate reference.
Like you see on Selling Sunset.
Right. If you tell an employee, stop acting like a jerk in meetings, you have just anchored them to a negative identity. Their immediate evolutionary human response will be to raise their shields and fight you to protect their ego.
Exactly. When identity is threatened, learning shuts down entirely. Instead, you frame the feedback around their stated personal goals.
How does that sound in practice?
You say, in service of your goal to become a VP one day, the way you spoke in that meeting won't get you there. Next time, try saying it exactly like this instead.
The psychology there is brilliant because you physically place yourself on the exact same side of the table as them.
You are no longer the antagonist punishing them for the past.
You are the mentor giving them the script for their own successful future. But delivering this kind of highly nuanced, empathetic leadership requires immense emotional energy.
It does. Which brings us to a toxic myth. The source material actively tears down the facade of the hyper-independent, self-made leader.
This is especially relevant regarding the immense pressure placed on female leaders.
To be hyper-independent, just to avoid looking soft in male-dominated industries.
There's this pervasive idea that you have to do everything yourself, execute flawlessly at the exact same time without ever relying on anyone else.
The source material calls it out for what it is, a lonely, exhausting facade that just creates the exact misery people are working so hard to avoid.
Great leaders are deeply, unapologetically dependent on others.
They depend on their partners, they depend on their executive team, they depend on their friends.
Trying to be the lone genius holding up the weight of the world like Atlas doesn't make you a better leader.
It just makes you a massive burnout risk. Remember the foundation we talked about earlier, the deep concrete required to build the skyscraper.
Yeah?
Part of that foundation is the network of people around you who step in to carry the emotional weight when your own tolerance is stretched to the breaking point.
So as we bring this all together, let's look at the incredible journey we have taken through this source material today.
We covered a lot.
We started by realizing that action has to precede confidence. You build genuine competence by surviving the Whole Foods bathroom panic attacks of life.
We learned that discipline isn't about white-knuckling through desire. It is about engineering your physical environment so that bad habits have immense friction and good habits have none.
We saw that emotional tolerance, not market strategy, is the ultimate safety net for scaling any massive endeavor.
And finally, we discovered that true leadership is about crafting meaning, sharing goals, and deeply relying on your team rather than struggling alone to look invincible.
It all ultimately comes down to the internal compass guiding those systems.
And I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought from the source material regarding our values.
This story really stuck with me.
During the massive Texas freeze a few years ago, when the power grid was collapsing, a neighborhood sent out an urgent alert. They asked everyone in the community to turn their heat down to 50 degrees so the local power grid wouldn't fail completely.
Specifically to save power for the children and the elderly in the area who were freezing.
Leila Hormozi saw the message and immediately turned her heat down to 50 degrees. She sacrificed her own warmth without hesitating.
But hours later, the heat ran out entirely anyway.
When she checked a text thread with her neighbors, she found out exactly why the grid failed.
While she was shivering, her neighbors had quietly cranked their thermostats up to 85 or 90 degrees to hoard the heat for themselves.
It is incredibly easy to claim you have noble values when the environment is comfortable.
It's very easy to say you're in service of others when it costs you absolutely nothing.
But values are only truly tested when they demand a painful sacrifice. Leila calls her core values her internal board of directors, the quiet voices that govern her actions when nobody else is watching.
So here's the question we want to leave you with today. It is easy to have values when things are easy, but if your values suddenly cost you your warmth, your comfort, or your status, would you still turn the dial down?
Think about what your own internal board of directors would say in that moment.
And remember, before you take that next big leap in your life, you do not have to wait for the magical feeling of confidence to arrive. You just have to jump and trust that you will build the parachute on the way down.
Until next time.